stood at the observation window of the Galactic Council station, watching the blue and green planet below. His massive frame, towering nearly 3 meters tall, cast a long shadow across the smooth floor. His scaled skin reflected the light from distant stars. The warrior had fought in 17 wars across the galaxy. He had defeated the armies. He had held fortresses against impossible odds. Now the council sent him to assess a species called humans. The data in his hand made no sense. According to the files, humans lived only 80 years on average. They were fragile creatures with soft skin that bled easily. They required constant sleep and food. They broke bones from simple falls. They died from infections that his people could survive. They lived for 300 years. They were born strong and they only grew stronger. Read that humans were recommending themselves as allies against the Empire. The idea seemed absurd. These creatures would fall in one battle. The council wanted his honest assessment. They wanted to know if humans could actually fight. Had seen the colony on 452b. Humans had built it from nothing, carved structures from rock and metal. Their engineering was impressive, he admitted, but engineering meant nothing in war. Engineering could not stop a plasma blast. Engineering could not defeat trained soldiers. He turned from the window and made his way to the meeting chamber. Captain Lisa Monroe was waiting for him. The human woman was small, barely reaching his chest. Her skin was pale, fragile-looking. She had brown hair and dark eyes that showed no fear when he entered the room. That was unusual. Most species showed fear when they saw him. Monroe stood and extended her hand in the human greeting. Noted this was a gesture of peaceful intent. He had studied human customs. "Welcome," Monroe said. Her voice was steady. "The Galactic Council told us you would be assessing our military readiness." "Your military readiness is a concern," said. He did not waste time with pleasantries. "Your species survives less than a century. You cannot match thee in experience, technology, or biological strength." Monroe did not look offended. Instead, she moved to a chair and gestured for him to sit. Found human chairs too small for him, so he remained standing. "You are correct about our individual limitations," Monroe said, "but you should understand what we can do together. Would you like to tour the colony?" The tour lasted 3 hours. Monroe showed him the defensive fortifications. The humans had built them with clever angles and multiple defensive positions. When one area was attacked, soldiers could retreat to another prepared position while still maintaining fire on enemies. The design was intelligent, admitted to himself, but design could only do so much. Monroe showed him the training grounds where soldiers practiced combat. They were fast, he observed, faster than he expected, but still too slow. A warrior could move 3 times faster than these humans. When the humans fired their weapons, the accuracy was good, but the weapons themselves were less powerful than military-grade equipment. Again, found them wanting. They walked past the residential sector where civilians lived. Children played in open areas. This seemed like poor military planning too. Children should be protected from sight, kept deep in underground bunkers. They were vulnerable. They served no combat purpose. Then it happened. A young human child, no more than 6 years old, wandered away from its group. The child did not understand danger. It walked toward the restricted zone where energy barriers hummed. In that zone, containment fields kept dangerous materials isolated. If the child touched an active barrier, it would suffer severe injury or death. Monroe saw the child at the exact same moment as. Without hesitation, without planning, Monroe ran. She ran toward a danger that had nothing to do with her survival. The child was not her genetic offspring. That much could determine from colony records. Monroe was not responsible for this child's safety beyond her role as colony leader, yet she ran as if her own life depended on it. Monroe reached the child just before it touched the energy barrier. She grabbed the small human and pulled it back, holding it tightly against her body. Her own leg brushed the barrier's edge. Her skin burned and could smell the burned flesh. Monroe did not cry out. She did not hesitate. She held the child and moved away from the barrier, protecting the small human with her body. A medical officer rushed to Monroe. Her leg injury was serious, burned deep. Monroe gave the child to another human and accepted treatment, but her eyes remained fixed on the child until she was certain it was safe. Stood motionless. This action violated every principle of logical behavior. Monroe had endangered herself for an individual who provided no tactical advantage. She had burned her own body. She had risked her life. "Why did you do that?" asked when Monroe was being treated. Monroe looked at him with genuine confusion. The child was in danger. The child is one individual among thousands. Your death would remove an essential military leader from your colony. "I could not let a child die," Monroe said simply. "It does not matter that I am a military leader. A child's life is not less valuable because I hold a position." Left the medical facility. He walked alone through the colony. He tried to understand this action through logic, but it could not be analyzed logically. Monroe had acted on something else, something beyond survival instinct, something beyond rank and military value. That night accessed the colony's database. He read human history. He saw thousands of examples of humans throwing away their own survival to protect others. Parents jumping in front of vehicles to save children. Soldiers running into burning buildings to rescue wounded comrades. Humans diving into water to rescue strangers they had never met. The behavior was constant throughout human history. It was not rare. It was normal for humans to value others above themselves. Requested permanent station at the colony. The Galactic Council approved his request immediately. They wanted detailed analysis of these creatures. For the first time in his military career, realized he did not understand an opponent, and this made humans far more dangerous than any creature he had ever studied. They understood strength, but humans possessed something else, something that operated outside the rules of survival, something that made them unpredictable. Monroe recovered from her burn within a week. She returned to her duties as if nothing significant had happened, watched her carefully now. He needed to understand what made these fragile creatures willing to embrace death so easily. He needed to know if they could truly fight alongside warriors. He was about to find out. The alarm screamed across the colony at dawn, felt the vibrations through the ground before the notification reached his communicator. The Empire had attacked. Their ships fell from the sky like meteors, and weapons fire lit up the morning with red and orange explosions. Expected panic. He expected the humans to surrender immediately. Their weapons were inferior. Their soldiers were limited in number. Logic dictated surrender as the only viable option. They had 3 battle cruisers in orbit. The colony had no orbital defense. Instead, Captain Monroe was already moving. Found her in the command center, issuing orders with perfect clarity. Her voice was steady and controlled. She coordinated simultaneously with 3 different military units through communication channels. "Move all civilians to Shelter Delta immediately," Monroe commanded. "Medical teams, begin preparing triage units in Bunker 3. Combat teams Alpha and Bravo, establish defensive positions at the North Ridge. Cut power to Sections 7 and 9 to redirect energy to shields." The humans moved like they had trained for exactly this moment. The data showed they had conducted defense drills, yes, but drills were theory. Combat was different. Yet the humans executed their plans with precision. Observed Lieutenant Green organizing soldiers with hand signals and simple commands. The soldiers responded instantly, no confusion, no delay. The first explosion hit the outer colony wall. The structure held. The humans had built their fortifications well, and they had built them for exactly this type of assault. Realized Monroe had not just thought about defense. She had obsessed over it. Every structure had multiple purposes. Every position could fall back to another defended position. Monroe called to him, "We need your strength. Can you join defensive position 7? Moved without question, he had come to assess these humans. Now he would fight alongside them. Position 7 was held by Sergeant Victoria and 8 soldiers. When arrived, Victoria showed no surprise at the massive warrior joining her unit. She simply updated him on positions, enemy movements, and the defensive plan. "They will try to advance through the eastern corridor," Victoria told him, pointing at the rough terrain ahead. "Our goal is to make it expensive for them. We cannot hold forever, but we can buy time for civilians to reach secure shelters." Understood this strategy. Make the enemy spend resources and soldiers in exchange for ground. It was sound military thinking. The humans were not delusional about their chances. They were realistic about what they could achieve. The first wave of soldiers came through the corridor. They moved in tight formation, their armor thick and their weapons heavy, had fought the before. They were strong and disciplined. They made excellent soldiers. Victoria's team opened fire. The weapons were less powerful than equipment, but they were accurate. The first volley killed 2 soldiers and wounded 3. They dropped to defensive positions and returned fire with overwhelming force. The human soldiers held their positions. They did not panic. They did not run. Victoria called out adjustments to their formations, moving soldiers to cover each other's weak points. When one position took heavy fire, soldiers from less exposed areas provided suppressive fire to reduce the enemy's ability to attack. Moved to his assigned position, a soldier tried to flank their defensive line, intercepted the attack. That was strong but was stronger. The combat lasted less than a minute. When it ended, the soldier was dead. The humans did not celebrate. They kept fighting. Over the next hour, waves of soldiers attacked Position 7 repeatedly. Each time, Victoria's team adjusted their defensive formation. They fell back to secondary positions when the primary line became untenable, but they did it in an organized manner that prevented them from breaking through completely. Observed something remarkable. The humans showed no fear. The younger soldiers who had never seen combat before fought with the same discipline as the experienced soldiers. They followed orders without hesitation. When told to retreat, they retreated in good order. When told to advance, they advanced despite the terrible danger. One human soldier, a young man named James Cooper, was positioned in an exposed location that the targeted repeatedly, saw the risks immediately. James should have moved to a more protected position. He was a young soldier with minimal combat experience. He would likely die if he remained where he was. Victoria moved toward James to relocate him. James refused the order. "If I move, they will advance through the gap," James said. "The colony children are only 50 meters behind our position. Let me hold this line." Victoria wanted to argue, could see it in her face, but she did not. She simply nodded and returned to her own position. James held his location and absorbed weapons fire that would have targeted civilians. The young human did not flinch when his armor heated from the blasts. He did not cry out when blood ran down his face from a shrapnel wound. He stood at his post and fired his weapon with mechanical precision. Realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. These fragile humans were not afraid of death. They faced certain danger with acceptance. They valued the lives of their civilians more than their own survival. Across the colony, learned later, similar scenes were occurring. Soldiers held positions knowing they would not survive the battle. They did this not because they were ordered to. They did this because civilians depended on them. As afternoon turned to evening, they changed tactics. Instead of attacking through the defensive positions, they began bombing from orbital platforms. Monroe was running out of time. She made a critical decision. She would lead a strike team to attack the command ship in orbit. She knew the odds of success were minimal. She knew most of her team would not return. She called for volunteers. Every able soldier in the colony volunteered. The humans knew they were signing up for almost certain death. They volunteered anyway. stepped forward as well. Monroe looked at him with surprise. "You came to assess us," Monroe said. "You do not have to fight our war." "I need to understand," replied simply. "I need to know what you are." Monroe accepted his offer without further discussion. She began organizing the strike team. Soldiers moved to gather weapons and prepare for the assault. No one questioned the suicide mission. No one asked for guarantees of survival. As the sun fell below the horizon, watched these small, fragile humans prepare to attack an enemy that far outnumbered them. They knew they would face death. They prepared for it anyway. The warrior realized his assessment of humans had been catastrophically wrong. These creatures were not weak. They were not fragile in the ways that mattered. They were something far more dangerous than he had imagined. When Monroe gave the signal to move toward the orbital launch site, moved alongside them. The humans charged forward into the night, ready to fight for their survival. But they were not fighting for themselves. They were fighting for the civilians waiting in shelters. That was the real source of their strength. The assault on the command ship lasted only hours, but it changed everything believed about warfare and survival. Monroe's team advanced through the colony's underground tunnels toward the orbital launch facility, fought at the front alongside Lieutenant Green. The soldiers defending the facility were well trained and well armed. They held solid defensive positions. The humans had no advanced equipment and fewer soldiers. By every measurement, they should have failed immediately. Instead, they advanced with brutal efficiency. Green coordinated the attack with simple hand signals. When one position drew heavy fire, soldiers from protected areas would provide covering fire that forced them to keep their heads down. Then other soldiers would advance through the exposed ground. It was a slow process, measured in meters, but it worked. They were forced backward gradually. Saw something that fascinated him. The humans always prioritized protecting their wounded. When a soldier fell injured, other soldiers risked their lives running into heavy fire to drag the wounded comrade away from danger. Tried to analyze this behavior logically. A wounded soldier could not fight effectively. From a pure military standpoint, abandoning the wounded would save more lives and allow faster advancement. But the humans would not abandon anyone. A young soldier named James Cooper took a direct hit from a plasma rifle. The weapon burned through his armor and struck his shoulder. James fell hard on the concrete floor. Blood pooled around him quickly. The wound was severe. Any reasonable assessment suggested James would not survive the journey back to medical treatment. Two other soldiers immediately ran toward James, exposing themselves to fire. Thought they were making a tactical error. But as they moved, he saw the wisdom in their choice. They held their fire momentarily to avoid hitting James by accident. In that momentary pause, the two soldiers grabbed James and pulled him back to a protected position. Continued forward and came face to face with a commander that was strong and well trained. They fought in close combat while weapons fire erupted around them. Was stronger, but that was faster. The fight lasted longer than expected. Finally, struck the down. But in that moment of victory, saw something that stopped him cold. Monroe had moved forward to defend while he was fighting. She had placed herself in the line of fire, standing in a completely exposed position, to ensure no could attack from the side. The human captain had sacrificed her own safety to protect an alien warrior. Realized Monroe was wounded. A plasma blast had scorched her leg badly. She was bleeding heavily. Yet she continued forward as if the injury meant nothing. "We need to move," Monroe said through pain. "The launch facility is ahead." The strike team reached the launch facility and secured the area, found Dr. Henry Foster waiting with medical equipment. The human doctor immediately began treating the wounded soldiers. Foster worked with desperate efficiency. 3 soldiers were too badly wounded to continue. Foster made the difficult decision to give them pain medication and keep them stable while he moved to treat the others. "Why do you not let the severely wounded soldiers rest?" asked. "They will slow your mission." "We do not leave soldiers behind," Foster replied without looking up from his work. "They will wait here where it is safe. When this is finished, we will come back for them." Understood, this was a promise Foster believed completely. The doctor would fight his way back through enemy territory to retrieve these wounded soldiers, even if it meant dying in the attempt. This was not strategy. This was identity. Humans did not abandon their own. Monroe began organizing the launch sequence. The goal was to reach the command ship in orbit and plant explosives on the primary weapons system. If successful, the ship's ability to bombard the colony would be eliminated. If they failed, everyone on this team would certainly die. "I want to understand something," said to Monroe as soldiers prepared for launch. "You know this mission will likely kill everyone. You know your colony has almost no chance of victory. Why do you continue?" Monroe looked at the alien warrior with tired eyes. "Because 2,000 civilians are hiding in bunkers. Because if we do not do this, they will dig them out and kill them all. Because some things are worth dying for." Had heard humans say similar words before. He had read about humans throughout history making the same choices. Humans valued things beyond survival. They valued duty. They valued honor. They valued the lives of others above their own. "This is illogical," said. "Yes," Monroe agreed, "but it is human." The launch team boarded the vessel. 12 soldiers and Monroe joined them. The small ship tore through the atmosphere and raced toward the orbiting command ship. The journey took less than an hour. When they approached, defense systems locked onto them. The small human ship took direct hits. Alarms screamed inside the vessel. Sparks fell from damaged ceiling panels. The ship shuddered from weapon impacts. Any reasonable pilot would have retreated. Instead, Monroe kept the ship moving forward. "Impact in 3 minutes," she called out. "Prepare for boarding." The collision was violent. The human ship struck the vessel and clung to its hull like a parasite. The impact threw everyone sideways. Soldiers struggled to maintain consciousness, but they were already moving toward the airlock, weapons ready, minds focused. The command ship tried to separate itself, but the human ship's hull clamps held firm. Monroe had piloted them into an unbreakable embrace. The boarding team moved through the ship, fought alongside humans in narrow corridors against defenders. The humans moved with purpose. They did not hesitate. They did not show fear. They advanced knowing they were far from home with limited ammunition and no possibility of retreat. Finally, they reached the weapons control room. An engineer named Grace began working on the targeting system. Her hands moved across the alien interface with focused determination. She had studied captured technology. She had prepared for this moment. Grace was severely wounded. A blade had cut deep into her abdomen during their assault through the ship. She was losing blood rapidly, but she did not stop working. "How long?" Monroe asked. 3 minutes, Grace replied, her voice weak. And Green held the entrance to the control room. Soldiers advanced through the corridor. The humans and fought back desperately. Soldiers fell, but new soldiers took their positions. 2 minutes, Grace said. Realized the gravity of the situation. The human soldiers would not survive this. They were fighting an enemy with superior numbers, superior armor, superior weapons. The only possible outcome was death. Yet they did not retreat. They did not ask for escape. They fought because the mission mattered more than their lives. 1 minute, Grace announced. Monroe moved beside. "We are not getting out," she said simply. "When this is finished, they will kill us. But when we are dead, our colony will be free from orbital bombardment. That matters." "You will die for this," said. "Yes," Monroe replied. "That is the choice we make." The explosives activated. The weapons system exploded in a cascade of destruction. The entire weapons platform collapsed. The command ship began losing orbital stability. Monroe looked at, "Run, get to the ship, live to tell them what you learned here." "I will not leave you," said. "That is an order from a military commander to a soldier," Monroe said firmly. "Go." Ran. Behind him, human soldiers threw grenades to block pursuit. They died holding the corridor open so could escape. The alien warrior raced through the ship as explosions erupted around him. He reached the human vessel and activated the emergency launch sequence. The ship tore away from the vessel just as the weapons platform exploded completely. Piloted the damaged ship back toward the colony. Below, the orbital bombardment had stopped. The command ship was falling from orbit, crippled and dying. Monroe and her team had succeeded. But the price had been absolute. Every single human on the strike team had almost certainly perished. They had known this would happen. They had walked into certain death with open eyes and steady hearts. For the first time in his long military career, understood what true terror meant. It was not fear of dying. It was facing warriors who did not fear death at all, could not believe what he saw when he landed the damaged ship. Captain Monroe stood on the landing platform, bloodied and burnt, but alive. Behind her stood most of the strike team. They were injured. Many would not survive their wounds, but they had escaped. Monroe had ordered a retreat the moment the weapons platform exploded. She had made soldiers fall back through the ship in organized teams. It had taken all her tactical skill and brutal determination, but she had gotten most of them out. 8 soldiers were still missing, likely dead in the corridors of the vessel, but the core team had survived. On the ground, the battle situation had shifted dramatically. The command ship, crippled by the strike team's sabotage, was falling from orbit. The 2 remaining battle cruisers had lost the support of the primary weapons platform, but they were still in orbit and they were still dangerous. Colonel Aaron Hayes, the human military commander, stood in the command center examining tactical displays. Entered to find him studying enemy positions with intense focus. Hayes was older than Monroe, with gray hair and a face marked by previous wars. Unlike Monroe, who remained at the command center, Hayes had been fighting on the ground with his soldiers. "They will attempt to land ground forces," Hayes said without preamble. "They will focus on destroying the colony's infrastructure and eliminating resistance. We have approximately 6 hours before significant landing forces arrive." "What is your plan?" asked. "Attack their landing sites before they establish, disrupt their supply lines, make them fight for every meter of ground," Hayes replied. "We cannot win a defensive battle here. The colony is too exposed, but we can bleed them enough to force them to consider retreat." Hayes turned to look directly at, "Will you join another assault?" Did not hesitate, "Yes." The warrior had come to assess humans. Instead, they had shown him something he had never encountered before. They possessed a quality that transcended biology and training. They possessed a willingness to sacrifice that transformed them into something dangerous and powerful. Over the next hours, Hayes organized 3 separate assault teams. The goal was to attack the 3 primary locations where soldiers would land. Each assault was nearly suicidal. Each assault would face enemies with superior numbers and equipment. When Hayes called for volunteers, every combat-capable soldier came forward. Hayes looked at the gathered humans with something close to sadness. He knew most of these soldiers would die. He knew he was ordering them to almost certain deaths. But the alternative was the destruction of the colony and the death of everyone sheltering in the bunkers. The choice was clear. Hayes divided the soldiers into teams. He placed experienced commanders with each group. Then he did something that caught attention. Hayes took up weapons and moved toward the primary assault team. Lieutenant Green, who was assigned to lead one of the other assault teams, noticed this immediately. "Colonel, you should remain in command. You cannot fight on the ground." Hayes looked at the younger officer with patience. A commander who asks soldiers to die must be willing to die alongside them. That is not military strategy. That is honor. That is what separates us from our enemies. Hayes joined the primary assault team personally, was assigned to this team. So was Green, who had abandoned his own command to stay with Hayes. That left Sergeant Victoria to lead the third assault team. The assault began at dawn. 3 groups of human soldiers moved toward the landing zones simultaneously, fought with Hayes' team against the primary landing site. They had established a perimeter with defensive fortifications. The humans attacked with everything they had. The fight was brutal and desperate. The soldiers were strong, well-trained, and well-equipped, but the humans moved with a unified purpose that seemed almost supernatural. They supported each other constantly. When one soldier fell, others immediately covered the gap. When an area came under heavy fire, soldiers from protected positions would provide suppressive fire. Hayes fought at the front of the assault. He wielded a plasma rifle with deadly accuracy. His tactical decisions were perfect. When one approach proved too well defended, he ordered the assault to shift direction. When he saw an opportunity to exploit a weakness, he committed soldiers to that weak point with ruthless efficiency. Watched as Hayes positioned himself in the most exposed location on the battlefield. Weapon fire erupted around him constantly. The human colonel should have died within minutes, but Hayes moved with the precision of a master warrior. Every step took him to better ground. Every movement protected his soldiers. When a warrior moved to flank the human position, Hayes intercepted the attack personally. They was younger and stronger, but Hayes was experienced. Hayes understood how fought. He had faced them before. He moved like water, letting the strength slide past him, then striking at weak points in armor and movement. The fell. Hayes kept advancing. Gradually, the human assault gained ground. They were being pushed back. It seemed impossible, but the humans were actually winning this engagement. Then support came from the other assault teams. Victoria's team had broken through their own landing site defenses. Her soldiers were now hitting the primary landing zone from the side. They found themselves under attack from 2 directions. Green's team reported they had overrun their landing site and were moving to reinforce the primary position. The humans, who should have been slaughtered by superior numbers and equipment, were actually routing the realized what was happening. The humans had chosen their attack timing and positions perfectly. They had attacked with 3 simultaneous assaults that forced them to divide their forces. Each individual human assault was outnumbered, but together, the 3 assaults were creating overwhelming pressure at each location. It was brilliant tactical thinking. It was the kind of strategy that should have come from experienced military commanders with years of training and analysis. Yet the humans had developed this plan in just hours, working under desperate circumstances. By late afternoon, they were in full retreat. They abandoned their landing zone and pulled back to their remaining orbital vessels. The humans pursued them, pushing them harder, giving them no opportunity to regroup. But victory came with enormous cost. Of the 300 soldiers who had participated in the assault, 87 were dead. Many more were severely wounded. The human colony had barely survived. Hayes stood among the casualties, looking at the dead soldiers with an expression of terrible grief. He had sent these soldiers into combat. They had trusted his judgment. They had died because of his orders. "This is the cost of command," Hayes said to. "These are the people who did what I asked them to do. They followed my orders because they trusted me. Now they are gone." Had expected the human commander to show anger or hate for the. Instead, Hayes showed only profound sadness and a sense of personal responsibility for every death. "Would you make the same choice again?" asked. Hayes looked at the alien warrior for a long moment. "Yes, because the civilians in the bunkers are alive because of what these soldiers did. But that does not make it right. That does not make it acceptable. We saved lives by losing lives. That is not victory. That is survival." Over the next hours, the remaining forces from orbit. The battle was over. The colony had won. But the victory was hollow, filled with the weight of sacrifice. watched as human medics worked frantically to save the wounded. He watched as human soldiers helped carry their dead comrades to temporary shelters. He watched as civilians emerged from bunkers and began helping with the rescue efforts. No one celebrated. No one cheered. The humans understood that survival was not the same as triumph. Survival came with the price of those who had given their lives for it. 3 weeks had passed since the forces retreated from orbit. The colony was beginning to heal. Reconstruction had started on damaged structures. The wounded were recovering in medical facilities. The dead had been honored in a ceremony that found moving in ways he did not fully understand. The warrior stood alone on a ridge overlooking the human colony. The settlement below was small and fragile, looking against the vast landscape of 452b. It was built with materials that would eventually erode and fail. It was populated by creatures that would age and die within what seemed like a heartbeat compared to so long. By every objective measure, this colony was temporary and vulnerable. Yet it was beautiful. Observe the humans moving through the settlement. They worked together to rebuild. They helped each other carry materials. They organized shifts so everyone could rest. They seemed to move as parts of a single organism, each individual committed to the survival of the whole. Captain Monroe found him on the ridge. She moved carefully, still recovering from her wounds. The burns on her leg would leave permanent scars. Noticed she did not seem to care about the scars. She had already returned to her duties, coordinating supply distribution and helping reorganize the colony's defense systems. "I thought I would find you here," Monroe said. "I have been attempting to understand," replied. "The Galactic Council sent me to assess whether humans could fight. I came with a report to give them, but I cannot give that report. I cannot reduce what I have witnessed to simple military classifications." Monroe sat carefully on a rock beside the alien warrior. "What will you tell the council?" Turned to look at the human captain. "I will tell them the truth. That fighting next to humans, I learned what true terror feels like. Not because of what humans can do with weapons, not because of physical strength or speed. True terror comes from facing warriors who do not fear death." Monroe listened without interrupting. "Your species operates on principles that contradict survival logic," continued. "You value individuals you have no genetic connection to. You sacrifice yourself for strangers. You embrace death to protect others. They expected you to surrender. They expected you to accept defeat. They did not understand that you would choose death over allowing civilians to be harmed." "We protect our own," Monroe said simply. "That is what puzzles me," said. "Your definition of own includes the entire colony, the entire species. You saw them not as enemies to destroy but as opponents to resist. Even now, after they attacked you, I have heard no human speak of revenge. You speak only of defense and survival." Monroe was quiet for a moment. "Revenge would only bring more death, more pain. We have already lost enough. The survivors must now live with that loss. Adding more death does not honor the fallen. It only creates more suffering." Understood this intellectually, but it challenged everything the warrior had been taught. The conquered through strength. They defeated enemies through superior force. They achieved victory through domination. Humans were different. "I will request permanent assignment to this colony," said. "I will document human military strategy, human organizational structures, and human psychology. The galaxy must understand what you are. The galaxy must understand why you are more dangerous than any advanced technology or military force." Monroe smiled. It was a small smile but genuine. "You are welcome here. We could use someone who understands what we are and respects it." Over the following months, remained at the colony. He began training human soldiers in advanced combat techniques. He taught them how warriors fought. He taught them tactics that other civilizations used. In exchange, the humans taught him something far more valuable. They taught him what duty meant. They taught him what honor meant. They taught him that strength without compassion was merely brutality. Colonel Aaron Hayes approached one evening, while the warrior was reviewing combat footage with a group of soldiers. "How long do you plan to stay with us?" Hayes asked. "As long as you will have me," replied. "I came here to assess military readiness, but I have realized I came here to learn something about myself." "What is that?" Hayes asked. Looked at the human commander. "I came here believing that strength was the most important quality in a warrior. I believed victory belonged to the strongest and fastest and most heavily armed. I was wrong. Victory belongs to those who understand that their own survival is less important than the survival of those they protect. Victory belongs to those who would willingly die for their principles." Hayes nodded slowly. "That is what we believe." The warrior requested that the Galactic Council send his detailed assessment. He provided information about human military capabilities, human organization, human tactical thinking. But more importantly, he provided something the Council had not expected. He provided a warning. Wrote that the Galactic Council had underestimated humanity. He wrote that humans possessed a quality that was militarily invaluable. Humans were unpredictable because they were willing to lose everything for their principles. They were dangerous not because they were physically superior, but because they understood that some things mattered more than survival. He wrote that the Council should never attempt to conquer humanity. He wrote that any species that tried to dominate humans would discover a level of resistance that no amount of military force could overcome. Humans would fight to the last individual rather than accept enslavement. He wrote that humanity was not just a military power. Humanity was a moral force that would eventually reshape the galaxy. The Galactic Council, receiving this assessment from a warrior whose judgment they trusted, changed their stance on humanity. They offered the human colony official status as a recognized spacefaring civilization. They offered access to advanced technology and trading agreements. Most importantly, they offered the humans a voice in galactic affairs. Humanity had arrived among the stars not through conquest, but through sheer refusal to surrender. 6 years after the assault, stood watching a ceremony at the colony. Humans were dedicating a memorial to the soldiers who had died in the battle. Names were carved into a stone monument. Each name represented a human who had chosen death rather than allow the colony to fall. The humans gathered in silence. There was no celebration. There was no anger. There was only remembrance and the acknowledgement that these individuals had mattered. Their sacrifice had shaped the future of the human colony and all of humanity's expansion into the galaxy. Realized something profound in that moment. Humans would be remembered not for their weapons or their ships or their technology. They would be remembered for their choices. They would be remembered for the times they chose duty over safety. They would be remembered for the times they protected others at the cost of their own lives. That was the true strength of humanity. The alien warrior had come to assess whether humans could fight. He had discovered they could do far more than fight. Humans could inspire. Humans could transform. Humans could make creatures from other worlds understand that there was something in the universe worth dying for. As the ceremony ended and humans moved forward with their daily lives, stood watching them, he understood now why the Empire had retreated. It was not because the humans had superior weapons. It was because they had looked into the eyes of warriors who did not fear death and realized they could not win against such opponents. Fear, had learned, was not something that came from weapons. Fear came from understanding that you were facing enemies who had already decided they were willing to die. That made them unstoppable. That made them human.